Captain Sarah Chen stood at attention in the briefing room at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Her uniform was crisp, her posture was perfect, her record was flawless, but none of that seemed to matter to the men sitting across from her. Colonel Richard Hayes leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. His eyes swept over her with barely concealed skepticism. To his left sat Major Tom Brennan, who didn't even try to hide his smirk. 3 other senior officers completed the panel, and not one of them looked like they wanted her there. Captain Chen, Colonel Hayes began, his voice flat and dismissive. Your application for the Special Operations Task Force is impressive on paper. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. She knew what was coming. She'd heard it before. Different words, same meaning. On paper, Hayes repeated, letting the words hang in the air. But Special Ops isn't about paperwork. It's about physical strength, mental toughness, the ability to make split-second decisions in life-or-death situations. It's about carrying a 100-pound pack through hostile territory for days without sleep. I understand that, sir, Sarah said evenly. I've completed every qualification course. I've passed every physical test. Your scores are adequate. Major Brennan cut in. His smirk widened. For a woman, the other officers chuckled. Sarah's hands clenched briefly behind her back, but her face remained calm, professional. She'd learned long ago not to show emotion when they wanted to see her crack. I didn't just pass, sir, she said quietly. I ranked in the top 10% of my entire class. Gender wasn't a factor in the scoring. Gender is always a factor, Hayes said, leaning forward now. His voice dropped lower, more serious. Look, Captain, I'm sure you're a fine soldier. You've served your country well, but special operations is different. When you're deep in enemy territory and everything goes wrong, I need to know the person next to me can carry their weight. Can carry my weight if I go down. I can can you? Brennan challenged. Because when bullets start flying and it comes down to pure physical power, pure aggression, pure survival instinct, nature designed men for that, not women. That's not sexism. That's biology. Sarah met his eyes directly. With respect, sir, I've been in combat. I've been under fire. I've carried wounded soldiers to safety. I've done everything you're describing. In regular infantry, maybe, Hayes said. But Special Ops is the tip of the spear. It's the most elite fighting force in the world. And frankly, Captain, the presence of a woman in a unit creates complications. Distractions. The men have to worry about protecting you instead of focusing on the mission. I don't need protection, sir. I need a fair evaluation, Hayes sighed, exchanging glances with the other officers. The look said everything. Why are we wasting our time with this? Tell you what, Hayes said finally. We'll let you try out. Go through the selection process. But understand something, we won't make it easier for you. We won't lower the standards. And when you wash out, I don't want to hear complaints about discrimination or unfair treatment. Agreed. Every fiber of Sarah's being wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of his condescension, but she'd come too far to let pride derail her now. Agreed, sir, she said. I don't want special treatment. I just want a fair shot. You'll get it, Hayes said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe she'd last a week. Dismissed. Sarah saluted sharply and left the room. As the door closed behind her, she heard Brennan's voice, not quite quiet enough. 5 days. That's my bet. She quit in 5 days. I give her 3. Another voice responded, followed by more laughter. Sarah kept walking, her spine straight, her head high. She'd prove them wrong. She had to. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Sarah's life, not because of the physical demands she'd trained for years to build the strength and endurance needed, not even because of the mental challenges. Though they pushed her to her absolute limits, the hardest part was the constant undermining, the deliberate isolation, the way her own teammates seemed determined to see her fail. During a night navigation exercise, her compass mysteriously went missing from her pack. She completed the course anyway, using the stars in her training, arriving at the checkpoint only 2 minutes behind schedule. During a water survival drill, one of the male candidates accidentally held her under a few seconds too long. She came up gasping, but she came up fighting, and she passed out in the mess hall. The conversations would stop when she approached. In the barracks, she was given the worst bunk, the broken locker, the equipment that was just slightly damaged, but Sarah endured. She documented nothing. She complained to no one. She simply worked harder than everyone else, performed better than most, and refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her only real ally was Lieutenant Marcus Webb, a quiet, serious man who treated her like any other soldier. He spotted her during physical training. He offered tactical advice without condescension. He was, she suspected, the only one who actually wanted her to succeed. Don't let them get to you, Marcus told her one evening after a particularly brutal day. They're testing you differently than they test us. It's not right, but it's reality. I know, Sarah said quietly. I just have to be better than good. I have to be perfect. No, Marcus corrected. You have to be so good they can't deny you. There's a difference, she nodded, understanding. By the end of the selection process, Sarah had outlasted 70% of the candidates who started. Her final evaluation scores placed her in the top 15. She'd proven herself by every measurable standard. And yet, when the assignments were posted, her name wasn't on the primary team roster. She was designated as reserve status, a polite way of saying she'd completed the course but wouldn't be given an actual position. Sarah stared at the posting board, feeling a cold fury settle in her chest. She'd done everything right, met every standard, exceeded expectations, but it still wasn't enough. Because she was a woman, she was about to turn away. When Marcus appeared beside her, his face was tight with anger on her behalf. This is wrong, he said. Your scores were higher than half the guys they put on the active roster. Doesn't matter, Sarah said, her voice hollow. They were never going to accept me. I was naive to think otherwise. So what are you going to do? Sarah looked at him, then back at the board. What can I do? I followed the rules. I played their game. I lost, you didn't lose, Marcus insisted. You proved you belong. The fact that they can't see it is their failure, not yours. Sarah wanted to believe him, but as she walked away from that board, she felt the weight of every doubt, every insult, every dismissive look settling on her shoulders. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong in special ops. Maybe some battles couldn't be won. 3 months later, Sarah had resigned herself to her new reality. She'd been reassigned to a training position at Fort Bragg, teaching combat tactics to new recruits. It was important work, she told herself. It mattered, but every time she saw the special operations teams preparing for deployment, she felt the sting of what she'd lost. Colonel Hayes had been clear in their final meeting. You did well, Captain. Better than I expected, honestly. But special ops requires absolute unit cohesion. The men aren't comfortable with a female operator. It creates tension. I'm sure you understand. She'd understood perfectly. She understood that no matter how qualified she was, he'd never be given the chance, so she threw herself into training others, into being the best instructor she could be. If she couldn't serve in special ops herself, she could at least prepare others to do so. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stayed in touch. He'd made the active roster and was now part of Delta Force's Echo team. He'd call her sometimes after missions he was allowed to discuss, asking for her tactical opinion, treating her like the operator she should have been. You see things differently, he told her once. You think 3 steps ahead. The guys on my team, they're good, but they rely on Force first. You'd bring something we need. Doesn't matter what I'd bring, Sarah replied. I'm not there. Not yet, Marcus said. But things change. Sarah didn't believe him. Not then, but things did change. Just not the way anyone expected. It was a Tuesday morning when everything fell apart. Sarah was running a training exercise when she heard the alarm. Not a drill. Real alert status. The entire base went into immediate lockdown protocol. Within minutes, rumors were spreading like wildfire. A mission had gone wrong. A team was in trouble. There were casualties. Sarah's stomach dropped. Marcus was deployed. His team had left 4 days ago for what was supposed to be a routine extraction mission in a hostile region near the Syrian border. She tried to get information, but as a training officer, she wasn't in the operational loop. All she could do was wait and worry. That it wasn't until late that evening that she learned the truth. Echo team had walked into an ambush. The intelligence had been wrong. What was supposed to be a small, undefended compound was actually a heavily fortified position. The team had been forced to retreat to a secondary location, and now they were pinned down, surrounded, with wounded operators and limited ammunition. A rescue mission was being planned, but it was complicated. Sarah pushed her way into the Tactical Operations Center, using her security clearance from the Special Ops selection process. Officers crowded around screens showing drone footage and satellite imagery. The tension in the room was suffocating. Colonel Hayes stood at the center, coordinating with Washington, with field commanders, with anyone who might have a solution. Sarah found a lieutenant she knew and pulled him aside. Echo team, she said urgently. Marcus Webb, is he alive? The lieutenant confirmed. But wounded? They all are. 5 operators, 2 critically injured. They've fortified a position in an abandoned village, but they're surrounded by at least 30 hostiles. Maybe more. Sarah's mind immediately started calculating terrain, resources, entry points, escape routes. What's the rescue plan? She asked Dot. The lieutenant grimaced. That's the problem. Command wants to send in Bravo team, but the terrain is impossible for a direct assault. It's narrow mountain passes, limited visibility, perfect for ambushes. Bravo team is trained for desert operations, not mountain warfare in close quarters. What about air support? Weather's moving in, heavy clouds, risk of storms. Helicopters can't navigate those passes safely, and we can't risk losing more people. Sarah moved closer to the screens, studying the terrain. She'd studied geography like this before, had trained for missions in exactly this kind of environment. That an idea was forming. A dangerous idea, but it might work. She pushed through the crowd toward Colonel Hayes. Sir, I have a suggestion. Hayes turned, his face haggard with stress. When he saw her, his expression tightened. Captain Chen, this is an active tactical situation. I don't have time for, I know that terrain, she interrupted, pointing at the screen. I studied it during selection. I wrote a tactical analysis paper on mountain extraction operations in that exact region. So did half the candidates. Hayes snapped. But I'm here, and I know a way to get them out. Major Brennan stepped forward. With respect, Captain, this isn't a training exercise. This is real combat. We need experienced special operators, not classroom theories. Your experienced operators are dying, Sarah said bluntly. The room went quiet. And your rescue plan is going to get more people killed. I can see it from here. You're planning a direct approach through the main pass, overwhelming force, rapid extraction, but that terrain funnels you directly into kill zones. You'll be ambushed before you're within half a mile of the position. Hayes' jaw clenched. And you have a better idea. Sarah stepped to the screen, her training taking over. Here, she pointed. This ridge, it's too steep for a conventional approach, which is why the hostiles won't expect it. A small team, for people maximum, could climb it in darkness. It's only about 200 feet of technical climbing, but it puts you above the village, with clear subfence. And then what? Brennan challenged. You've got 5 wounded men who can't climb. You don't extract up, Sarah continued. You create a diversion, draw the hostile forces toward the ridge. While they're focused on the high ground, a secondary team moves through this ravine here and evacuates the wounded through the southern pass. It's longer, but it's hidden from the main hostile position. The room was silent. Officers studied the screen. Hayes' expression was unreadable. That's a significant climbing challenge, an older major said finally. In darkness, under potential fire, who on Bravo team has that No one, sir, another officer admitted. Bravo is desert and urban. Mountain climbing isn't their specialty. Echo team had the mountain training, someone else added quietly, but they're the ones trapped. Sarah took a breath. I have the training, sir. Every eye in the room turned to her. I was ranked expert in mountain warfare during selection. I've done technical climbs in worse conditions. I know this terrain. I've studied the tactical approaches, and I'm here, ready to go, right now. Brennan actually laughed. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Sarah said, meeting Hayes' eyes. You need someone who can make that climb and coordinate the extraction. I can do it. Captain Chen, Hayes said slowly. You're not part of an active special operations unit. You haven't been cleared for combat deployment with these teams. And frankly, you don't have the field experience for a mission this critical. Neither does Bravo team in this terrain, Sarah countered. Sir, 5 men are going to die if we don't get them out tonight. The weather window is closing. You don't have time to fly in another unit. You need a solution now, and I'm offering one. Hayes turned away, running a hand over his face. The weight of command had never looked heavier. She's right about the terrain, a tactical analyst said quietly. That ridge approach could work, and we don't have anyone else with the mountain skills. This is insane, Brennan muttered. We're talking about letting a woman who washed out of selection lead a rescue mission. I didn't wash out, Sarah said, her voice hard. I passed. You just didn't want to admit it. The room erupted in argument, officers shouting over each other, some supporting the plan, others calling it suicide, some questioning Sarah's qualifications, others pointing out that they had no better options. Through it all, Hayes stood silent, staring at the screen, at the small thermal signatures that represented his trapped operators. Finally he held up a hand. The room went quiet. Captain Chen, he said, if I authorize this and that's a significant if you'd be leading a team into an active combat zone. The risk is extreme. If you fail, those men die. If you fail, you might die. Do you fully understand that? Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I understand, sir, and you still want to do this. I don't want to, sir, but I can do it, and those men deserve every possible chance to come home. Hayes studied her for a long moment. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the doubt, the prejudice, but also, buried deeper, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she was right. All right, he said finally. The briefing room had never felt so cold. Sarah stood at the front, facing a hastily assembled team. 3 operators from Bravo team, all men, all staring at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison was the most vocal. Let me get this straight, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We're supposed to follow her into a combat zone. A training instructor who's never run a live op. She was top of her class in mountain warfare, Colonel Hayes said, though even he sounded uncertain. She knows the terrain. She's designed the tactical approach. For this specific mission, she's the most qualified person we have available. Most qualified woman, maybe, Morrison muttered. Most qualified person, Hayes repeated, his voice hardening. And she'll be mission commander. Is that clear, Sergeant? Morrison's jaw worked, but he nodded. Crystal, sir. The other 2 operators, Rodriguez and Kim, said nothing, but their body language spoke volumes. They didn't want her there, didn't trust her, didn't believe she could pull this off. Sarah ignored the hostility. She'd dealt with Worth during selection. Right now, 5 men were dying, and she was their best chance. Here's the situation, she began, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. Echo Team is here, in this abandoned village. They're surrounded by hostile forces, estimated at 30 to 40 combatants. 2 of our operators are critically wounded. They have maybe 6 hours before their position is overrun. She pulled up the terrain map. The hostile forces are concentrated here, here, and here. They're expecting a rescue attempt through the main pass. That's where they've set up kill zones. So we don't go through the main pass, Rodriguez said, studying the map. We climb the ridge. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. It's a 200-foot technical climb in darkness. Difficult, but manageable. Once we're on top, we have the high ground. We create enough of a diversion to pull hostile attention away from the village. While a second team extracts the wounded, Kim finished, nodding slowly. Through the southern ravine, right, the second team will be a medical unit with Humvees staged here. Once we draw the hostiles north, the medics move in fast, load up our people, and extract through the southern pass. Morrison leaned back in his chair. It's a good plan on paper, but it assumes we can make that climb without being detected. If they spot us halfway up that ridge, we're sitting ducks. That's why we move at 0 to 100, Sarah said. New moon, complete darkness. We use thermal gear to navigate, no lights. Silent approach until we're in position. And when they do spot us, Morrison challenged. Because they will. What's the engagement protocol? Sarah met his eyes. We hold that ridge for exactly 12 minutes. That's how long the medical team needs to reach the village, load the wounded, and reach minimum safe distance. 12 minutes of sustained fire to keep the hostiles focused on us. 12 minutes against 40 combatants, Morrison said flatly. With 4 operators with superior position and night vision advantage, Sarah corrected. They'll be shooting uphill in darkness. We'll have thermal imaging and clear lines of sight. Still suicide odds, Morrison said. It's a risk, Sarah admitted, but it's better odds than Echo Team has right now, and it's better than sending Bravo Team through those passes into a prepared ambush. The room fell silent. The 3 operators studied the map, the terrain, the timing. She could see them running scenarios, calculating odds. Finally, Rodriguez spoke. I've done technical climbing. That ridge is doable, but it's tight. If one person falls, we all fall. Then we don't fall, Sarah said simply. You've climbed in combat conditions before, Kim asked. Training simulations, Sarah admitted. Not live combat, but I've done the climb. I know the techniques. Training isn't the real thing, Morrison said. No, Sarah agreed. It's not, but it's what we have, and sitting here debating my credentials doesn't help the men who are dying. Morrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. For a moment, Sarah thought he might refuse outright, but he just stared at the map, his jaw tight. If we do this, he said finally, we follow the plan exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. We climb, we shoot, we hold for 12 minutes, then we extract. Understood. He was looking at Sarah when he said it, making it clear he expected her to be the weak link. Understood, she said calmly. Gear up, we roll in 30 minutes. The flight to the insertion point was silent except for the helicopter's rotor wash. Sarah checked her equipment for the 3rd time. climbing gear, rifle, ammunition, night vision, medical supplies. Everything was secure. Across from her, Morrison and the others did the same. No one spoke. No one looked at her. She wondered if they were thinking what she was thinking, that this might be the last hour of their lives. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through her headset. 2 minutes to drop. Sarah stood, grabbed the support handle. The others followed suit. The helicopter descended fast, staying low to avoid detection. When it was 10 feet off the ground, the crew chief gave the signal. Sarah jumped first, landing hard in the rocky terrain. The others followed immediately. The helicopter was gone seconds later, disappearing into the darkness. They were alone now, for people in hostile territory, miles from support, about to attempt a rescue mission that everyone thought was impossible. Sarah activated her night vision, the world turning into shades of green. She could see the ridge rising ahead of them, a dark mass against the slightly lighter sky. "Move out," she said quietly into her radio. "Stay low. Watch for sentries." They moved in formation, Sarah, on point. She'd studied this terrain for months during selection, had memorized every outcropping, every potential danger zone. Now that knowledge was being put to the test. They reached the base of the ridge without incident. Sarah looked up, her night vision showing the steep, rocky face they'd have to climb. "Equipment check," she whispered. They verified their climbing gear in silence. Ropes, carabiners, harnesses. Everything had to be perfect. "Morrison, you're second," Sarah said. "Rodriguez third. Kim anchor. I'll lead you." "Sure you don't want me on point?" Morrison asked. There was a challenge in his voice. "One last test." "I'm sure," Sarah said. "I know the route." She clipped into the rope system and began to climb. The rock was cold and sharp under her fingers. She moved carefully, testing each handhold, each foothold, before committing her weight. Behind her she felt the rope tighten as Morrison began his ascent. They climbed in silence. The only sounds were breathing, the occasional scrape of equipment against rock, the whisper of wind. Halfway up, Sarah's hand found a hold that crumbled under her grip. For one heart-stopping moment, she was falling, her body swinging out from the rock face. The rope caught her. Morrison's voice came sharp through the radio. "You good?" "I'm good," Sarah gasped, finding her footing. "Keep moving." She didn't let herself think about the drop below, didn't let herself think about what would happen if she fell. She just climbed out, one handhold, one foothold, one movement at a time. That it took 40 minutes to reach the top. Sarah hauled herself over the edge and immediately took up a defensive position, while the others completed the climb. When they were all up, she allowed herself one moment to catch her breath. Then she activated her thermal imaging and scanned the village below. She could see Echo Team's position. 5 thermal signatures huddled in a collapsed building. Around them, scattered throughout the village and the surrounding area, were dozens more signatures. The hostile forces and between the ridge and the village, she could see the thermal glow of vehicles. The medical extraction team, waiting for their signal. In position, Sarah whispered into the command channel. "Standing by for go signal." Colonel Hayes's voice came back immediately. "You have authorization. Execute on your mark." Sarah looked at her watch. 0200 exactly. She looked at Morrison, Rodriguez, and Kim. In the darkness, through their night vision goggles, they were almost identical. Just soldiers. Just operators. 12 minutes, she said. "We hold for 12 minutes. Then we go home." Morrison actually smiled, a sharp, fierce expression. "Let's give them hell." Sarah raised her rifle, sighted on the nearest hostile position, and whispered, "Execute." The night exploded with gunfire. The first shots were perfectly coordinated, for rifles firing as one, for hostile combatants down before they knew they were under attack. Then chaos erupted. The village below came alive with movement. Thermal signatures scattered, regrouping, trying to identify where the attack was coming from. Sarah could hear shouting in a language she didn't speak, the panic in their voices universal. "Targets left side," Rodriguez called out, firing in controlled bursts. Sarah swung her rifle, saw 3 hostiles running toward a position where they'd have a shot at the medical team. She fired twice. 2 went down. Kim got the 3rd. "Medical team is moving." Hayes's voice came through her earpiece. 9 minutes to extraction. 9 minutes. They just had to hold for 9 more minutes. The hostile forces had located them now. Bullets started hitting the rocks around their position, ricochets whining through the darkness. But Sarah had chosen the ridge well. The hostiles were firing uphill, in darkness, at targets they could barely see. Their shots were wild, desperate. Sarah and her team had thermal imaging, night vision, and superior position. Every shot they took was calculated, precise RPG. Morrison shouted. Sarah saw it, a thermal signature moving faster than the others. Someone with a rocket launcher, trying to get an angle on the ridge. She adjusted her aim, led the target by a fraction, and fired. The hostile went down. The RPG never launched. 6 minutes. Hayes updated. Sarah's rifle ran dry. She dropped the magazine, loaded a fresh one, all muscle memory and training. Beside her, the others did the same, their movements synchronized, but the hostiles were adapting. They'd stopped trying to charge the ridge. Instead, they were spreading out, creating crossfire positions, trying to flank. They're moving around the west side, Kim reported. If they get to that outcropping, they'll have a clear shot at the medical team. Sarah made a split-second decision. Morrison, Rodriguez, hold this position. Kim, with me. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She moved along the ridge, Kim following, heading west to cut off the flanking maneuver. She could hear Morrison cursing behind her, but he kept firing, keeping pressure on the main hostile force. Sarah reached the western edge of the ridge and looked down. For hostiles were climbing, trying to reach a position where they could fire down into the ravine, where the medical team was approaching. She couldn't let them get there. Suppressing fire on my mark, she said. She counted down 3, 2, 1. They opened fire simultaneously. The hostiles were exposed on the climb, nowhere to take cover. 3 went down immediately. The 4th tried to retreat but lost his footing and fell. For minutes, Hayes said. Sarah ran back to the main position. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. Adrenaline was the only thing keeping her moving. She dropped back into position beside Morrison. Below, she could see the medical team's thermal signatures reaching Echo Team's location. They were loading the wounded. Almost there, she breathed. Then she saw it. A vehicle moving fast from the north. Reinforcements. New contacts, she reported. Technical approaching from the north. Mounted gun. That changed everything. A mounted machine gun could tear apart the medical Humvees. Could kill the wounded before they escaped. 3 minutes, Hayes said. Medical team has the wounded. They're loading now. The technical was getting closer. Sarah could see the thermal signature of the gunner manning the weapon. I need that technical stopped, she said into the radio. We're trying, Rodriguez said, firing at it. But at this range, in darkness, hitting a moving target was nearly impossible. Sarah made another decision. The kind of decision that would either save everyone or doom them all. She stood up. Chen, what are you? Morrison started. But Sarah was already moving, running along the ridge to get a better angle. She could hear bullets hitting the rocks around her, feel the air displacement as rounds came close. She dropped to one knee at the edge of the ridge, steadied her breathing, and aimed. The technical was moving fast, bouncing over rough terrain. The gunner was traversing his weapon toward the medical team. Sarah led the target, adjusted for distance, for wind, for the vehicle's movement. She fired. The gunner jerked and fell. The technical swerved, the driver panicking. It crashed into a wall and stopped, disabled. 2 minutes, Hayes said. Medical team is rolling. Sarah ran back to the main position, diving behind cover as return fire intensified. The hostiles knew they were running out of time. They were pushing hard now, desperate. They're charging, Kim said. Sarah looked down. He was right. The remaining hostiles were making a suicide run at the ridge, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. Focus fire, Sarah ordered. Center mass. Don't let them reach the base. The 4 operators fired in a continuous rhythm. The hostile charge broke against their position like a wave against rock. Bodies fell. The survivors scattered. 1 minute, Hayes said. Medical team has reached minimum safe distance. Sarah's rifle clicked empty. She reached for another magazine, found none. She was out. I'm dry, she reported. Same, Rodriguez said. Morrison fired his last rounds and cursed. Out. Only Kim still had ammunition, and he was down to his last magazine. Below, the remaining hostiles were regrouping, realizing the firing from the ridge had stopped. Getting brave again. 30 seconds, Hayes said. Sarah pulled her sidearm. If they rushed again, she had maybe 10 shots. Against 20 or 30 remaining hostiles, she looked at Morrison. He'd drawn his sidearm too. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she saw something other than doubt in his expression. Respect. 10 seconds, Hayes said. The hostiles started moving toward them again. Sarah aimed her pistol. Extraction team is clear, Hayes said. You are authorized to extract. I repeat, get out of there now. Sarah had never heard sweeter words. Fall back, she ordered. Rappel on my mark. They moved as one, clipping onto the descent ropes they'd secured during the climb. Sarah went last. providing cover as the others descended. She fired her pistol 3 times at the advancing hostiles, just enough to make them hesitate. Then she was over the edge, rappelling fast, the rope burning through her gloves. She hit the ground hard and ran behind her. The hostiles reached the top of the ridge. Shots rang out, but in the darkness their aim was wild. Sarah and her team reached the extraction point. The helicopter was already there, rotors spinning. They threw themselves inside. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked back at the ridge, at the village, at the battlefield they were leaving behind. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, with no support, they'd done it. Echo team was safe. The wounded were being evacuated to proper medical care. The mission was a success. Sarah let her head fall back against the helicopter's hull, exhaustion crashing over her like a physical weight. Across from her, Morrison was staring at her. She met his eyes, waiting for whatever he was going to say. He extended his hand. She took it. No words were needed. The sun was rising by the time they landed at Fort Bragg. Sarah climbed out of the helicopter, her body aching, her mind numb with fatigue. A crowd had gathered. Medical personnel rushing to tend to the rescued operators, command staff waiting for debriefs, and soldiers, dozens of soldiers who'd heard what happened. Sarah tried to slip past them, but Colonel Hayes stepped into her path. She straightened, came to attention. Sir Hayes looked at her for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he came to attention and saluted her. Sarah froze. Officers didn't salute other officers in that way. It wasn't protocol. It was something else. Something more. It was respect. Around them, one by one, the other soldiers came to attention, saluted. Morrison stepped forward from the crowd. His face was serious, but his voice carried clearly. She's the real deal, sir. Best operator I've served with. Male or female, doesn't matter. She earned it. Hayes nodded slowly. Then he looked at Sarah. Captain Chen, I owe you an apology. Several, actually. I let prejudice cloud my judgment. I evaluated you based on gender instead of ability. That was wrong. Sarah didn't know what to say. She'd imagined this moment so many times, imagined telling him off, making him admit his bias. But now that it was happening, she felt no satisfaction. Only tired. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. There's an opening on Echo Team, Hayes continued. They'll need a new team leader while Lieutenant Webb recovers from his injuries. The position is yours, if you want it. Everything Sarah had worked for, everything she'd fought for, being handed to her in this moment. She thought about Marcus, wounded but alive because of tonight. She thought about Morrison, Kim, and Rodriguez, who trusted her when it counted. She thought about every obstacle, every insult, every moment of doubt. I want it, sir, she said. Hayes smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. Then you've got it. Welcome to Special Operations, Captain. For real this time. The gathered soldiers erupted in applause. Sarah felt hands slapping her shoulder, heard voices offering congratulations. But the moment that mattered most came when a medical gurney passed by. Marcus Webb, bandaged and exhausted, reached out his hand. She took it. Told you, he said, his voice weak but triumphant. Things change. Sarah smiled, feeling tears she wouldn't let fall. Yeah, they do. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a new group of special operations candidates. Among them were 3 women, young and nervous and trying hard to look confident. One of them raised her hand. Ma'am, is it true you led the rescue operation? The one they're calling the Midnight Ridge mission? Sarah looked at the young woman. She saw herself 3 years ago. Determined, scared, ready to prove herself against impossible odds. It's true, Sarah said. Was it hard? Another woman asked. Getting them to take you seriously. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She thought about lying, about making it sound easier than it was. But these women deserved the truth. Yes, she said. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not the mission, not the combat. The hardest part was proving that I belonged every single day, even when I'd already proven it 100 times before. The women's faces fell slightly, but Sarah continued. It was worth it. Because now you're here. Because maybe you won't have to fight as hard as I did. Because maybe the next woman who wants to be a special operator won't have to prove herself twice for every once that a man does. That's progress. Slow but real. She looked at all the candidates, men and women alike. Here's what I learned, she said. Respect isn't given. It's earned. And sometimes you have to earn it over and over until people finally understand that you were qualified all along. But if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to be better than good enough, if you're willing to prove yourself not just once but as many times as it takes, you'll get there. She smiled, thinking of Morrison's handshake, of Hayes' salute, of Marcus's proud grin. "And when you do get there," she said, "it's worth every moment of doubt, every moment of struggle, because you'll know you earned it, truly earned it." The women sat straighter. The determination in their eyes burned brighter. Sarah felt a swell of pride, not just for herself, but for them, for everyone who'd fought this battle before her and everyone who'd fight it after. They told her women don't belong in special ops, until she led the rescue that proved them all wrong, and now, nothing would ever be the same.